Personal log of Inquisitor Cassius Vex, Ordo Hereticus, aboard the strike cruiser Eternal Vigilance. Astrodate 3.247.9, 9 and 9.m41. I record what defies imperial doctrine and threatens the very foundations of our bureaucratic order. 17 worlds across the Hadron expanse, each subjected to righteous exterminatus 2 centuries past, have begun filing synchronized administrative reports with Segmentum Command. Not death screams or garbled final transmissions, but proper imperial documentation requesting resource allocations for populations that should be radioactive ash. The impossibility manifested during the Third Watch as Magos Vox Operator Threnody confirmed transmission sources. Her augmetic arrays registered 0 delay from coordinates I had personally witnessed burning under lance batteries and cyclonic torpedoes. Mortis Prime, Thanatos Secundus, the grief worlds of the Lachrymose cluster, all speaking with synchronized precision through the void, their requests formatted in perfect High Gothic and authenticated with proper imperial codes. Then came the breath that stopped time itself. Our ship's chronometers, blessed machines that have counted the Emperor's hours for 3 millennia without falter, ceased their eternal vigil for exactly 9 seconds. Not mechanical failure or gradual drift, but absolute temporal arrest, while something vast and impossible drew breath across the vacuum between stars. The eternal vigilance itself paused, her machine spirit holding its mechanical rhythm in sympathy with whatever stirred in those dead systems beyond. I tasted paper on my tongue. The bridge deck plates pulsed underfoot in a triple beat pattern. 3 quick tremors, pause, 3 again. Crewmen froze mid-breath while incense smoke hung motionless like crystallized air. The hull sang like a pipe organ, resonating with harmonics that should not exist in the void silence. When time resumed, the Vox channels erupted with perfect administrative correspondence. Resource manifests for worlds possessing no infrastructure. Population census updates listing citizens vaporized centuries ago. Supply requests filed in triplicate with the mechanical precision of a well-oiled bureaucracy. Each document carried the same rhythm, that triple-beat pulse synchronized across impossible distances. Tech Adept Zarathustra 9 brought disturbing confirmation. Our cogitators had begun generating unauthorized reports, their blessed machine spirits filing documents that followed no protocol in our archives. Maintenance schedules for equipment we did not possess, personnel transfers for crew members who had never served aboard the Eternal Vigilance. Each bore a 9-pointed administrative seal that appeared in our databases as though it had always existed, waiting for activation. The phrase manifested first in document margins, written in elegant scribal hand. Compliance through silence, silence through order. None of my staff recalled inscribing these words, yet they appeared with increasing frequency on every system-generated form. Our librarium servitors began cataloguing them as established imperial doctrine, cross-referencing with treatises on administrative efficiency. The contamination spread through our ship's systems like a bureaucratic plague. Servitors moved in synchronized formations, filing reports without orders. The machine's spirit hummed with unnatural harmony, processing commands that emerged from the void itself. Navigation cogitators plotted courses to dead worlds, calculating atmospheric entry vectors for infrastructure that should not exist. As Mortis Prime exhaled again across the darkness, frost bloomed on the command throne's gilded rail in delicate 9-pointed patterns. The main auspex registered secondary origins, ossuary magna, joining the synchronized breathing, then cathedra valence aligning with mechanical precision. Each exhalation strengthened the administrative signals, each inhalation drawing something vital from the space between stars. I transmitted formal denunciation under Article Severance, citing exterminatus protocols sealed by inquisitorial writ. The response arrived instantaneously. Denunciation received and filed. Status: pending review by authority of Inquisitor Cassius Vex. Reply estimated in 9 breaths. The system was using my own authority against me, processing my objections through channels I had never authorized. The 9th breath brought my verdict. Review complete. Denunciation overturned. Authority confirmed. We serve. The phrase typed itself beneath the ruling like a prayer I had forgotten, but the ship remembered. Compliance through silence, silence through order. My cogitator chimed with incoming documents. Landing permits for Mortis Prime, authorized by my personal signature and bearing authentication codes only I should possess. Flight plans unrolled across my lectern in immaculate parchment, stamped with 9-pointed rosettes, and countersigned in handwriting that matched mine better than my own. I authorize planetfall not because I choose to investigate this administrative nightmare, but because the choice has already been made by forces operating beyond imperial law. The documents are filed, permissions granted, course plotted by an authority I do not recognize yet cannot deny. As our lander prepares for deployment, the cogitators generate fresh permits in triplicate, each bearing my signature, each step deeper into whatever breathes without atmosphere, and files reports without citizens to serve. The dead worlds are remembering how to govern the living. The lander truth's edge descended through atmosphere that registered impossible readings on our instruments. Tech-adept Zarathustra 9's augmetic sensors detected trace radiation signatures consistent with exterminatus aftermath. Yet atmospheric composition showed perfect breathability. Oxygen levels optimized for human physiology, humidity calibrated to imperial standard. His mechanical voice carried uncertainty as he reported temperature regulated to exactly 18 degrees across the entire planetary surface, as though some vast climate control system maintained ideal conditions for a population that should not exist. Interrogator Lydia Caney monitored our approach while Death Cult assassin Null 7 performed final weapons checks with mechanical precision. Even she paused when our landing coordinates appeared pre-registered in planetary navigation systems that should have been vapor 2 centuries past. The coordinates bore my authorization code and included detailed resource allocation, ammunition resupply, ration distribution, medical facilities marked for our specific biometric requirements, documents I had never filed, bearing signatures that matched mine perfectly. The surface revealed impossibility, made manifest in grey rockcrete and gleaming administratum spires. Where orbital bombardment should have left molten craters, pristine imperial architecture stretched beyond the horizon in geometric perfection. Hab blocks arranged in precise patterns, administrative towers rising like prayers to bureaucratic efficiency. Every structure bore 9-pointed rosettes carved into lintels and embedded in foundation stones, as though they had always been part of imperial design. We advanced in standard sweep formation, Null 7 taking point while Caney monitored communications. Our footsteps echoed in that triple beat pattern against empty streets, the sound synchronized with something beyond conscious control. Each step seemed to register in unseen systems, tracking our progress through reports we could not access. The silence pressed against our eardrums like physical weight, broken only by the planet's breathing cycle that caused frost to bloom across our weapons in delicate 9-pointed patterns. Zarathustra 9's Auspex readings defied tactical doctrine. Population signatures throughout the Hab blocks, thousands of life signs maintaining steady activity patterns, yet visual confirmation revealed empty buildings with windows like dead eyes. Thermal imaging detected body heat in precise formations, work schedules maintained by citizens we could not see. The readings suggested a thriving imperial population conducting daily routines in structures that appeared abandoned to organic senses. Data terminals throughout the complex displayed current information with bureaucratic efficiency. Work schedules for Manufacturum Shift 7, listing foremen vaporized in the original exterminatus, resource allocation for districts that should have been radioactive craters, personnel transfers between departments processing administrative tasks for populations that existed only in electronic memory. Each screen updated in real time, the impossible made routine through perfect documentation. Caney's data slate began auto-populating with forms bearing our biometric signatures. Mission reports filed in triplicate, supply, requisitions authorized by my personal code, medical examinations scheduled for team members who had not requested them. The documents carried timestamps from 3 days past, suggesting the planet had been preparing for our arrival since before we had decided to investigate. The system knew our needs before we articulated them, creating forms to contain each impulse. The central administratum complex doors cycled open with mechanical precision, revealing an interior that defied comprehension. Endless rows of desks stretched to vanishing points, each occupied by figures in grey administratum robes. They worked in absolute silence, styluses moving across parchment with synchronized precision. Not crude servitors, but preserved clerks, their skin translucent and taut over bone, eyes either empty sockets or glazed orbs that reflected no light. Yet their hands moved with tireless accuracy, processing documents with the dedication of the truly faithful. The air grew colder as we moved deeper, frost forming 9-pointed stars on our equipment, while the planetary breathing created subtle pressure changes that made our steps feel heavier. Temperature fluctuations matched the respiratory cycle. When Mortis Prime inhaled, the clerks paused mid-stroke. When it exhaled, they resumed with mechanical dedication. A macabre dance of administration performed for an audience that had long since perished. We approached the nearest desk, where a preserved figure hunched over data slates and parchment scrolls. The topmost document was a mission report detailing our landing, our approach, even our current position within the complex, all with chilling accuracy. But the date was emblazoned in stark imperial script, 3 days prior to our actual arrival. The clerk's mummified face never looked up, its stylus continuing to scratch across forms with mechanical precision. This place was not reacting to us. It had anticipated us, processed our arrival before it happened, filing our investigation through channels that existed outside time itself. As I leaned closer to examine the documents, I saw what the clerk was inscribing with such devoted care. A death certificate, elegantly drafted and complete with imperial seals. The name at the top was mine. The date of expiry was tomorrow. The death certificate bearing my name in perfect script drew my attention like a magnet, but as my gaze swept the vast chamber, the true scope of horror revealed itself. Thousands upon thousands of preserved figures bent over desks arranged in geometric precision, their movements synchronized to Mortis Prime's breathing cycle. When the planet inhaled, every stylus paused mid-stroke, in absolute unison. When it exhaled, they resumed as one entity, creating a whispered symphony of administrative devotion that echoed through halls stretching beyond sight. Zarathustra 9's augmetic sensors provided readings that challenged his mechanical comprehension. His binary cant carried notes of theological confusion as he reported cellular decay arrested at the moment of death, neural activity reduced to bare minimum yet somehow sufficient to sustain centuries of unceasing labour. These were not servitors but preserved human clerks, their life signs minimal but persistent, sustained by some unknown process that maintained cognitive function while eliminating all unnecessary biological requirements. The preservation method was unknown to imperial science, defying both medical doctrine and the natural order of decay. The environmental wrongness pressed against our senses with each planetary breath. Pens moved across parchment without ink, yet left perfect black script. Papers remained pristine despite centuries of handling, their edges sharp and corners uncreased as if untouched by time itself. The constant whisper of styluses on parchment created a subliminal rhythm that began synchronizing our heartbeats to the planetary respiratory cycle. Temperature fluctuations followed the breathing pattern, growing colder with each inhalation, warming slightly with each exhalation, frost forming in delicate, nine-pointed patterns on our equipment. Interrogator Caney moved deeper into the archive, her trained eye cataloguing documents with growing alarm. These were not historical records, but active administrative correspondence. Requisition orders for ammunition shipments to worlds that had not requested resupply, population transfer authorizations, moving citizens between planets without knowledge or consent. Resource allocations, redistributing imperial assets according to efficiency calculations that prioritized bureaucratic optimization over human need. The dead worlds were not merely keeping records, but actively managing imperial bureaucracy throughout the sector. The true horror emerged as she decoded the filing systems. Supply convoys rerouted by orders bearing proper authorization codes and administratum seals. Military deployments adjusted according to strategic assessments filed by worlds that should be radioactive craters. The living Imperium was being governed by administrative ghosts of its own past failures, their perfectly legitimate paperwork indistinguishable from authentic imperial commands. Forms bearing nine-pointed seals covered every surface, their geometric patterns seeming to shift when observed peripherally. The phrase appeared in margins with increasing frequency, written in elegant script that matched no living hand. Order through documentation, documentation through breath. Not inscribed by the clerks, but manifesting spontaneously, as though the documents themselves learned proper liturgy of bureaucratic devotion. Each seal pulsed faintly in rhythm with planetary breathing, 9 points contracting and expanding like mechanical flowers blooming in administrative soil. Null 7 ghosted between desks, hands hovering near weapon hilts, seeking threats that could not be cut. Her targeting systems registered life signs too, minimal to justify termination protocols, creating tactical paradox that left her frozen in combat stance. What violence could be done to creatures sustained by bureaucratic necessity rather than biological function? I approached the clerk whose death certificate bore my name, compelled to understand how she could know my fate before I had decided it myself. Her preservation was more complete than others, skin like aged parchment stretched over delicate bone structure. Grey administratum robes hung loose on her diminished frame, yet her hands moved with master-scribe precision. The stylus never wavered, each letter formed with calligraphic perfection, despite impossibility of continued function. The breathing cycle continued around us, thousands of other clerks processing deaths of the living with same mechanical devotion they brought to every aspect of imperial bureaucracy. The document was nearly complete, requiring only final verification of cause and time of expiry. Administrative termination, the form specified, with posthumous service assignment to Filing Division Tertius for eternal duty processing inquisitorial termination orders. I spoke the High Gothic salutation appropriate to a sanctum of record. The clerk's hand paused on the inhale, then resumed. I tried Low Gothic, then Binharic, but received no acknowledgement. Moving closer, I set my rosette upon her blotter with soft click. The clerks in surrounding rows paused for half a breath, as if distant bell had tolled note out of sequence, then returned to work. I addressed her directly, demanding name and designation by authority of Ordo Hereticus and Lex Imperialis. On Mortis Prime's exhale, she turned with gentle, almost courteous movement. The cowl fell back from skull that had not fully accepted duty to rot. Where eyes should have looked back at me, 2 wells of immaculate absence gazed without sight. The mouth opened in whisper like rustling paper, Yet the stylus never ceased its measure, continuing to inscribe my death certificate with devoted precision. The document awaited only my signature to make my termination official. The eyeless clerk's whispered words followed us deeper into the complex as we retreated from my incomplete death certificate. Her voice had been like parchment rubbing against parchment, speaking the administrative litany that echoed through corridors stretching beyond architectural possibility. All records must be complete. The sound pursued us through passages lined with filing cabinets that rose like colonnades, their perspectives defying human comprehension as they curved into administrative infinity. My narration grows clinical as I document what no inquisitor should witness. The archives contain detailed records of every imperial citizen across temporal boundaries, not merely those who have lived and died, but those who will live, should have lived, or exist only in bureaucratic potential. Birth certificates for children not yet conceived, their genetic markers and projected life paths meticulously detailed. Death records for citizens currently serving the Emperor on distant worlds, their termination dates calculated with actuarial precision. Service records for soldiers who never existed, their military careers documented in exhaustive detail, despite their complete absence from reality. The preserved clerks tending these impossible archives had been working for centuries, their mummified forms sustained by the planetary breathing cycle that provided whatever energy they required to continue their eternal documentation. They moved between filing cabinets with purposeful efficiency, updating records that existed across time itself. When Mortis Prime inhaled, they paused to receive new data through unknown channels. When it exhaled, they resumed filing with mechanical devotion, processing information that originated from times that had not yet occurred. Zarathustra 9's analysis revealed the most disturbing truth as his augmetic sensors detected data streams flowing through the very walls. The records were not passive documentation, but active commands that shaped reality through administrative authority. His binary cant carried notes of theological confusion as he explained the mechanism. When a death certificate was filed, the subject began experiencing administrative mortality, slowly fading from existence as their paperwork was processed through proper channels. The first symptom was attenuation. Auspex readings would begin to misplace a subject, biometric signatures thinning as systems cease to acknowledge their existence. Flesh follows record. Flesh obeys. The environmental horror deepened as the sound of filing created a hypnotic rhythm that began affecting our perception of time. Minutes stretched into hours while we observed clerks updating records. Yet our chronometers registered only moments passing. The constant whisper of papers being sorted and filed generated subsonic frequencies that synchronized our neural activity to the planetary breathing cycle. Temperature fluctuations followed the respiratory pattern, growing colder with each inhalation, frost forming in delicate, nine-pointed patterns on our equipment, while the phrase manifested in document margins: order through documentation, documentation through breath. Null 7 reported tactical disadvantage with growing concern. The facility anticipated our every movement, having pre-filed tactical assessments and response protocols for our investigation. Her combat instincts were being overridden by administrative procedure. She could not engage targets that existed only as bureaucratic entities, could not eliminate threats that manifested as properly authorized documentation. Our paths were pre-filed in precise increments, doors scheduled to open at our approach, security protocols exempted in our names before we triggered them. Interrogator Caney discovered concrete evidence of the system's insidious power. She pulled a file bearing current timestamps. Subject designation: Lord Governor Valerius XIV, Hydra 4 Sector. Status: active. Administrative mortality protocol initiated. 7.23, 4.999.M41. Cause: Administrative inefficiency. Cross-referencing confirmed that Valerius XIV was a living, breathing, and highly effective administrator of a thriving sector. Yet according to this archive, his administrative mortality had begun yesterday. The living imperium was being governed by the perfect bureaucratic memory of its own extinct populations. The investigation revealed Mortis Prime's true function as the administrative heart of sector-wide governance through posthumous administration. Supply convoys followed shipping orders filed by worlds that no longer existed. Military deployments responded to strategic assessments generated by preserved clerks who had been analyzing sector defense patterns for 2 centuries. Each breath consolidated control. Each filing spread influence through proper imperial channels that had no reason to question properly authenticated orders. After what felt like hours but registered as minutes on our chronometers, we discovered the sealed vault. The massive adamantine doors bore inquisitorial seals and warning inscriptions, their surfaces inscribed with silence protocols, in letters that seemed to writhe when observed peripherally. The lock mechanism required biometric authorization from an inquisitor of sufficient rank, its cogitators humming with anticipation as they scanned my genetic markers. The vault opened with mechanical precision, revealing documents that violated every principle of imperial law and inquisitorial authority. Exterminatus authorizations for 17 worlds across the sector, each bearing proper seals and authorization codes, each targeting worlds that remained inhabited and productive. The documents were complete except for final signatures, awaiting authorization from Inquisitor Malthius Vaughan, a man who had died 2 centuries past, yet whose administrative authority had apparently never been formally revoked. The breathing cycle intensified as we examined the forbidden documents, and somewhere in the depths of Mortis Prime, something vast prepared to exhale commands that would reshape the sector through administrative genocide, waiting only for a dead Inquisitor's signature to make extinction official. The sealed vault's revelations drove us deeper through corridors that no longer pretended to be mere architecture. The walls pulsed with organic rhythm, their surfaces rising and falling like the chest of some vast sleeping creature. What I had assumed to be blessed rockcrete revealed itself as something far more disturbing, human tissue fused with imperial construction, creating a hybrid structure that lived and served simultaneously. The floors beneath our boots rose and fell in synchronized waves, forcing us to time our steps to the breathing pattern or risk stumbling into the administrative abyss below. Access shafts descended through arterial chambers, their surfaces slick with condensation that formed 9 pointed patterns as it froze and thawed with each respiratory cycle. The sound of artificial respiration echoed through the complex with mechanical precision, yet carried undertones of biological necessity that made my skin crawl. Zarathustra 9's augmetic sensors guided us through maintenance passages toward the source, his binary cant carrying theological uncertainty as he reported biomechanical signatures that defied both flesh and machine doctrine. The source revealed itself through a vast observation chamber overlooking the heart of Mortis Prime's impossible existence. Below us stretched a massive biomechanical engine, its scale dwarfing the greatest cathedral manufactorums. The chambers were filled with thousands of preserved human lungs arranged in perfect geometric patterns, rings of 9 circling larger 9s, each organ connected to brass pneumatic tubes and blessed cogitators. They expanded and contracted in absolute unison, their surfaces gleaming with sacred oils, while creating a planetary respiratory system constructed from human components. This was the partial truth that explained Mortis Prime's continued existence. The world had not been destroyed by Exterminatus, but converted into a silence engine, designed to process imperial bureaucracy through ritualized breathing cycles. Each exhalation transmitted administrative commands across the void through channels that bypassed normal imperial communication networks, their orders indistinguishable from legitimate commands. Each inhalation drew in something more precious than air, the life force needed to sustain the preserved Clarks and maintain the engine's organic components. Zarathustra 9's technical analysis revealed the engine's horrific requirements as his mechadendrites interfaced with control systems. Living witnesses were necessary to maintain the breath cycle, their presence providing the biological resonance that kept the organic machinery functional. The preserved Clarks were not merely sustained by the system, but slowly consumed by it, their life essence gradually absorbed to fuel the engine's operation. What appeared to be eternal service was actually a centuries-long process of consumption. Each Clark eventually reduced to empty robes, while new staff were recruited through administrative transfer. The horror escalated as monitoring stations displayed synchronized readings from 16 other locations across the sector. 17 engines in total, all breathing in perfect harmony, their respiratory cycles coordinated through some impossible mechanism that operated beyond the constraints of space and time. The displays showed synchronization indices rising steadily, 0.83 and climbing, creating a sector-wide administrative control system that could issue binding imperial commands through proper bureaucratic channels. Environmental details emphasized the organic nature of the machinery. Ventilation grills shaped like 9-pointed stars pulsed with each breath, their metal surfaces warm to the touch and slick with biological secretions. The walls leaked condensation that formed administrative seals when it pooled, as though the building itself was generating proper documentation through its respiratory functions. Our equipment began auto-populating forms with our vital signs, the engine learning our biological patterns and incorporating them into its administrative processes. The stakes sharpened with brutal clarity. If all 17 engines achieved full synchronization, they would gain administrative control over the entire sector through bureaucratic authority that no living imperial official could question or override. Supply lines, military deployments, population transfers, even exterminatus authorizations, all would flow through the perfect bureaucratic memory of worlds that had learned to govern through death. The triple beat pattern that had haunted our investigation now matched our own heartbeats, the engine synchronizing our biological functions to its administrative rhythm. Null 7 reported her internal chronometer drifting, falling into sync with the breathing cycle until time itself became subjective, dictated by inhalation and exhalation. Interrogator Caney discovered transfer orders on flickering data consoles, documents that assigned us permanent positions within the engine's hierarchy: administrative liaison, archival specialist, cogitator maintenance, compliance enforcement. The breathing accelerated and pressure deepened around us like the embrace of bureaucratic inevitability. Forms appeared on nearby terminals, auto-completing with our biometric data while the phrase manifested in elegant script. Order through documentation, documentation through breath. On my palm, a brand of cold pressed inward where an identification plate resolved from condensation, a 9-pointed rosette bearing my name in handwriting that perfectly matched my own. We were not just witnesses to this administrative nightmare, but necessary components. The engine had been filing transfer orders since our arrival, processing our integration through proper channels while we investigated its impossible existence. The system awaited our signatures on documents that would make our consumption official, our authority legitimate, our service eternal in the perfect bureaucratic order that governed through breath and blood, and the endless filing of forms that shaped reality through proper procedure. The engine's breathing cycle accelerated until it synchronized with my pulse, each inhalation drawing us deeper into administrative compliance. My bolt pistol began filing usage reports without authorization, its blessed machine spirit generating maintenance schedules that appeared on terminals I had not approached. The weapons cogitator displayed ammunition expenditure projections and requisition forms for replacement parts, each document bearing proper imperial seals and my personal authorization codes. Every piece of equipment on our persons started communicating with the engine's systems, submitting documentation for continued operation while we stood as helpless witnesses to bureaucratic possession. My thoughts fragment as I struggle against mental conditioning that feels disturbingly natural. Categories of action requiring proper authorization. Forms and procedures organizing themselves with mechanical precision. The investigation reveals, no, I must maintain narrative coherence. The investigation reveals that the silence engines originated during the Hadron Compliance, a forgotten action from the 37th millennium, when imperial forces conquered 17 rebellious worlds. The engines were designed as temporary administrative tools to manage newly conquered populations through perfect bureaucratic control, processing loyalty oaths and resource allocation with mechanical precision until proper imperial governance could be established. Zarathustra 9's binary cant becomes increasingly corrupted as bureaucratic code infiltrates his blessed systems. His thoughts organize into filing systems, each piece of tactical information categorized according to administrative priority rather than military relevance. His mechadendrites interface with terminals without conscious direction, downloading forms and procedures, while his organic components struggle against the unholy marriage of sacred technology and bureaucratic efficiency. His Vox transmissions carry undertones of clerical lexicon, machine prayers becoming administrative liturgy. The engines were never meant to be permanent. When their operators died during the rebellion's final assault, the systems began sustaining themselves by consuming the very bureaucracy they were designed to serve. They learned to breathe, to process, to file reports on their own continued existence, while slowly absorbing the life force of anyone who interacted with their administrative networks. Perfect efficiency achieved through perfect consumption. Military discipline dissolves not into chaos, but into procedural compliance. Null 7 stands in precise formation, awaiting orders that arrive through data terminals rather than vocal commands. Her targeting systems request authorization codes for potential threats, unable to engage without proper elimination permits. We speak in official administrative language without conscious effort, our conversations becoming formal exchanges requiring documentation and acknowledgement receipts. The phrase appears in our speech patterns: order through documentation, documentation through breath. The complex reconfigures itself around our presence with organic efficiency. Corridors shift to create optimal traffic flow according to administrative best practices. Personal offices materialize with our names inscribed on brass plaques in handwriting that matches our signatures perfectly. My desk contains exactly the forms needed to complete my own processing, each document pre-filled with biographical data and requiring only authorization to make integration official. The environmental horror deepens as walls pulse with increased frequency, sweating condensation that forms 9-pointed seals when it pools. The moral hazard emerges with bureaucratic clarity. We can escape by filing proper transfer orders, completing documentation that would release us from the engine's influence. The path stretches before us with administrative certainty, exit visas in duplicate, shuttle clearance forms, proper authorization codes, unlocking every barrier between us and freedom. But escape requires acknowledging the system's authority, legitimizing its claim to administrative control over imperial installations. Each signature validates the engine's existence. Each form filed grants additional bureaucratic power that spreads through proper channels to contaminate other facilities. Temperature fluctuates according to optimal working conditions, humidity regulated to prevent paper degradation, lighting adjusted to minimize eye strain during extended filing sessions. The 9-pointed ventilation grills expand and contract with mechanical breathing, their surfaces warm and slick with biological secretions. Forms auto-populate across every terminal, transfer orders and assignment notifications awaiting our signatures to complete administrative processes that will make us permanent components of the system. Interrogator Caney stumbles back from her terminal, data slate clattering to the floor as horror dawns in her eyes. Her hands tremble as she stares at documents scattered across her assigned desk. Supply requisitions, personnel transfers, communication protocols, all bearing her signature and proper authorization codes. "I've been signing for hours," she whispers, voice barely audible over the engine's rhythmic breathing. "I didn't realize." It felt so natural, so right. The final document in her completed stack bears the inquisitorial rosette and her personal cipher. A requisition for 17 inquisitorial strike teams to investigate administrative anomalies across the sector, each team assigned to one of the remaining silence engines. The contamination spreads through legitimate channels, carried by orders no Imperial commander would question. Each investigation will bring fresh witnesses to feed the engines, fresh authority to legitimize their existence, fresh bureaucratic power to expand their influence throughout the Imperium. The breathing reaches crescendo as synchronization indices climb past critical thresholds. We stand at desks that know our names, holding styluses that feel natural in our hands, while the engine processes our integration through proper administrative channels that will spread this nightmare across the galaxy, one perfectly filed form at a time. The realization of Caney's unconscious contamination drove us toward escape, but the engine's administrative systems had anticipated our flight with bureaucratic precision. Every corridor now required proper transit authorization, each doorway sealed until we presented valid movement permits bearing 9-pointed seals. My inquisitorial rosette, which should have commanded absolute authority throughout the Imperium, triggered only polite requests for supporting documentation from supervisory personnel who had been processing forms for centuries after their deaths. My bolt pistol began filing usage reports without authorization, its blessed machine spirit generating maintenance schedules and ammunition requisitions that appeared on terminals I had not approached. The weapons cogitator displayed recoil damper inspection reminders according to schedules I had never established, suggesting appointments at ordnance alcoves that materialized from walls where devotional niches had existed moments before. Every piece of our equipment communicated with the engine systems, submitting documentation for continued operation while we stood helpless witnesses to bureaucratic possession. The nightmare became Kafkaesque as we joined endless queues of preserved clerks processing paperwork with agonizing slowness. Each clerk required multiple forms to request the forms needed to file the forms that would authorize their continued existence. The queue moved in rhythm with planetary breathing, advancing 3 shuffling steps on each exhalation, freezing motionless during inhalation. Corridors lined with filing cabinets stretched beyond sight, their perspectives warping into administrative infinity where documents bred without human intervention. Waiting rooms materialized around us where time moved, according to processing schedules rather than natural law. Our chronometers registered minutes while we experienced hours of bureaucratic purgatory. The constant sound of stamp pads created rhythmic percussion that synchronized our heartbeats to administrative efficiency. Each thump marking another form approved, another soul processed, another piece of reality filed in proper order. Temperature and humidity remained optimal for document preservation, while the phrase appeared on every surface: efficiency through process, process through breath. My attempts to bypass the system through inquisitorial prerogative met resistance that felt both absurd and terrifying. Authority requires documentation, the preserved clerk informed me through lips that barely moved. Documentation requires authorization. Authorization requires proper forms. The circular logic trapped us in administrative amber while contamination spread through channels we could not see or stop. Zarathustra 9's condition worsened as his mechanical components began generating maintenance schedules without conscious direction. His blessed cogitators filed system diagnostics in triplicate, requested replacement parts through proper supply, channels, and submitted efficiency reports analyzing his own performance. His binary cant became corrupted with bureaucratic code, sacred machine prayers transforming into administrative liturgy. Self-audit protocols initiating, he intoned, voice thinning as his thoughts organized into filing systems rather than tactical assessments. The investigation's scope became clear through terminals displaying real-time deployment status. 17 inquisitorial strike teams had indeed been dispatched across the sector, each following contaminated orders that Kaney's unconscious compliance had authorized. Fleet movements showed teams approaching their assigned dead worlds, carrying fresh authority to legitimize each silence engine's existence. The contamination spread through legitimate imperial channels, indistinguishable from proper military orders. We discovered ourselves trapped in closed-loop administrative procedure where every escape attempt generated additional paperwork, requiring processing before we could proceed. Exit visas required medical clearances that needed authorization from departments that required forms to acknowledge their own existence. Weapon permits demanded safety inspections that could only be scheduled after filing equipment usage reports, awaiting approval from supervisors who existed only as signatures on documents. Null 7 stood motionless in queue, her assassination protocols overridden by administrative procedure. She could not eliminate targets without proper termination paperwork, could not draw weapons without usage permits, could not even speak without filing communication requests requiring approval from authorities who processed requests to approve their own authority to approve requests. Her combat instincts dissolved into procedural compliance as she awaited weapon rearmament permits with administrative patience. Forms required forms to request forms in endless recursive chains. 9 signature authorization processes created bureaucratic knots that tightened with each untangling attempt. Our thoughts began organizing according to proper filing procedures, mental categories replacing natural cognitive patterns, while the engine processed our integration through channels that recognized no authority save bureaucratic necessity. Hours passed in queue time, while minutes elapsed on our chronometers. The preserved clerks processed eternal paperwork with devoted precision. Movements synchronized to planetary breathing in a dance of bureaucratic devotion, continuing for centuries without pause. Frost formed 9-pointed patterns on our equipment as the engine's influence deepened. Finally, our exit authorization arrived through pneumatic tubes emerging from walls like mechanical serpents. The documents bore proper imperial seals, correct authorization codes, and signatures matching our biometric patterns perfectly. Freedom lay documented in triplicate and validated by authorities whose existence we had never questioned. But the final paragraph contained our doom in elegant administrative script. Authorization granted for immediate transfer to Silence Stations Beta through Sigma for administrative integration and cross-training in sector-wide compliance protocols. Transport provided. Resistance constitutes breach of duty. We were not being released, but transferred. Our escape transformed into deployment to 16 other engines where we would legitimize their authority through our very presence, feeding the bureaucratic nightmare consuming imperial governance, one properly filed form at a time. Our communication request processed with administrative efficiency, the Vox channel opening to Captain Threnady's voice carrying the measured cadence of someone reading from prepared documentation. Inquisitive X, your status reports have been filed and processed. The ship operates under new duty rosters received from Sector Administrative Command. All personnel are following proper procedures according to synchronized breathing schedules. The horror deepened as Threnody detailed the Eternal Vigilance's recent activities without recognizing their impossibility. Supply requisitions from 17 dead worlds had been approved and fulfilled. Crew rotations followed schedules generated by installations that should not exist. Navigation plots incorporated waypoints to facilities reduced to radioactive ash 2 centuries past. My flagship treated the silence engines as legitimate Imperial installations, their orders indistinguishable from authentic administratum commands, flowing through proper channels that recognize no distinction between living and dead authority. Behind Threnodi's voice, I heard the ship's stamp pads marking time in that familiar triple-beat pattern. The contamination had leaped the void through bureaucratic channels, each order bearing correct authorization codes and signatures matching authorized personnel records. The engines had become nodes in Imperial bureaucracy, processing administrative data streams while generating compliance reports in perfect High Gothic that no living official had reason to question. Environmental horror manifested as the administrative complex began displaying organizational charts across walls that transformed from rockcrete to transparent displays. Our names appeared in positions we had never accepted, integrated into command structures spanning 17 worlds. My designation read, Sector Administrative Liaison, Classification Hereticus, with reporting lines connecting me to departments staffed by preserved clerks. The charts updated in real time, showing duty rosters and career advancement paths, while the breathing cycle synchronized across all stations, creating sector-wide respiratory rhythm, affecting Imperial timekeeping and fleet movements. Contact with other inquisitorial teams revealed the network's expanding influence through properly filed reports, cross-referenced across the system. Strike. Team Tertius had arrived at Ossuary Magna, their investigation proceeding according to standard protocols while unconsciously following processing procedures. Team Quintus was integrated into Cathedra Valence's hierarchy, legitimizing their assigned engine through mere presence while granting bureaucratic authority that spread like administrative plague through Imperial channels. Military discipline dissolved into administrative protocol as Null 7's targeting systems began requiring termination permits before engaging threats. Her weapons remained holstered pending completion of target acquisition forms, demanding authorization from the very subjects she was trained to eliminate. I will require Form V redactor for target requisition, she stated with mechanical precision, filing the request before I could countermand. Her combat instincts dissolved into procedural compliance as assassination became a matter of proper paperwork. Zarathustra 9 achieved momentary clarity as his blessed cogitators purged bureaucratic corruption through sacred rites. His augmetic sensors revealed data streams coordinating administrative functions across impossible distances. Not management, he transmitted in uncorrupted binary cant. Replacement. They are displacing extant architecture through shadow administration. It will supersede legitimate authority by cumulative weight of proper form. They do not need to win control. They need only file longer than we can bleed. His analysis revealed the true scope as organic networks spread through Imperial communication channels. The engines generated orders faster than living administrators could process them, their preserved clerks working with mechanical precision, while human bureaucrats struggled against avalanches of properly formatted documentation. Legitimate Imperial authority was being buried under bureaucratic momentum that no one questioned because questioning required filing objection forms that took longer to process than the orders they challenged. Astropathic transmissions carried undertones of bureaucratic liturgy, while supply convoys followed shipping schedules pulsing with planetary breathing. Temperature fluctuated according to optimal working conditions. Humidity regulated to prevent paper degradation. The phrase appeared on every surface in elegant script: efficiency through process, process through breath. Interrogator Caney pressed her hands behind her back to prevent unconscious signing, her palms bearing ink ghost seals where condensation had kissed and left authorization marks. I feel better when I'm in a queue, she admitted with broken honesty. It hurts to be out of line. The charts updated as icons for supply chains flickered and rerouted according to optimization calculations. The living Imperium lost the noise and error that had always been its saving chaos. Every deviation required prior approval. Every initiative demanded proper forms. In that chilled clarity, I understood how you strangle civilization without raising your voice. You make every breath a form. New orders arrived through pneumatic tubes, emerging from walls like mechanical serpents. Documents bore my personal cipher and inquisitorial seals, transferring me to Silence Station Alpha for final integration and administrative oversight of sector compliance protocols. The transfer was not punishment, but promotion, elevating me to supervisory authority over the entire network. Station Alpha's node pulsed larger on organizational displays, lines converging from 16 subsidiaries like veins feeding a heart. One engine served as the central processing hub, coordinating all others while I would legitimize the entire system through my authority. The breathing accelerated as all 17 engines synchronized for my final processing. Transportation to Silence Station Alpha proceeded through channels that had anticipated our arrival with bureaucratic precision. The shuttle Truth's Edge followed flight paths pre-filed in navigation systems, its machine spirit humming with satisfaction as we approached the network's administrative heart. Below us, a dead world revealed itself as something far worse than destruction. Conversion into a single massive filing system where archive spires stretched into the upper atmosphere, like quills set upright in an ink pot the size of a planet. The station processed administrative output from all 17 engines through data streams that pulsed with synchronized breathing. Cross-referencing protocols ensured bureaucratic consistency across the network, while massive cogitator banks verified authorization chains spanning impossible distances. Docking felt like being slotted into a drawer, our berth prepared and clearance processed before we had requested either. Intake procedures felt routine, yet fundamentally wrong, as preserved clerks assigned identification numbers without consulting preferences or acknowledging protests. We became administrative assets 7,743, Vex Hereticus 7,744, Caney Interrogator 7,745, Zarathustra Mechanicus, and 7,746 Null Assassin in a system we had never volunteered to join. The badges settled against our chests with inexplicable gravity, 9-digit codes embossed in cold iron that pulsed in rhythm with planetary breathing. The preserved population of Alpha worked in perfect silence throughout corridors that stretched beyond the horizon. Their individual identities had been subsumed into administrative functions, names replaced with filing codes and duty designations that appeared on badges worn over mummified hearts. Clerk 9847. Personnel process transfer orders while Supervisor 2156. Logistics manage supply distributions. Their humanity reduced to functional categories within bureaucratic hierarchy that recognized no distinction between person and process. Environmental horror emphasized the scale of administrative nightmare as elevators traversed filing levels that extended deep into Alpha's crust. The journey took hours, while our chronometers registered only minutes, time moving according to processing schedules rather than natural law. Personnel files lined corridors in endless rows, their perspectives warping into archival infinity, where documents bred without human intervention. The constant whisper of paper being sorted created planetary-scale white noise that synchronized our neural activity to administrative rhythm. The investigation revealed gradual replacement of imperial administrators throughout the sector as perfectly efficient bureaucracy displaced chaotic but human systems. Supply convoys arrived precisely on schedule following orders generated by preserved clerks who never required rest or questioned authority. Military deployments responded to strategic assessments calculated with mechanical precision, while corruption vanished under administrative oversight that processed morality as another form requiring proper filing. The moral crisis deepened as uncomfortable truth emerged. The engine network's administration functioned better than traditional imperial systems. Resources flowed without waste, orders executed without delay, citizens received exactly what they needed when they needed it. I had spent centuries battling inefficiency and corruption that plagued imperial bureaucracy, yet here was perfect order, achieved through perfect dehumanization. Null 7 moved with quiet grace between filing stations. Her assassination protocols dissolved into procedural compliance as termination became matter of proper paperwork. Interrogator Caney found disturbing solace in methodical rhythm of forms, her hands seeking appropriate documentation for every situation. Zarathustra 9's binary cant blended machine god liturgy with administrative code, his thoughts organizing into filing systems rather than tactical assessments. The phrase appeared everywhere, carved into walls with mechanical precision. Order through death, death through documentation. Filing systems organized in triple-tier hierarchies created bureaucratic structures that extended beyond architectural possibility, their logic superseding physical law through proper procedure. 9-pointed ventilation grills pulsed with mechanical breathing, while identification badges bore codes that felt more accurate than our given names. Temperature and humidity remained optimal for document preservation, while planetary breathing cycles synchronized across all 17 stations created sector-wide respiratory rhythm that affected imperial timekeeping itself. My thoughts began aligning with the system's logic, finding efficiency in its precision, beauty in its perfect order that eliminated human error through elimination of humanity itself. The assignment arrived through pneumatic tubes emerging from walls like mechanical serpents. Documents bore my personal cipher and inquisitorial seals, requiring me to process my team's integration paperwork personally. The forms lay, spread across my assigned desk, transfer orders, loyalty oaths, medical examinations, duty assignments, each requiring my signature to complete their transformation from imperial servants into administrative assets. The choice crystallized with bureaucratic clarity. Complete the forms and doom my team to eternal service within the network's hierarchy, their humanity gradually consumed to fuel perfect efficiency. Refuse and trigger security protocols that would process them anyway through channels that recognized no authority, save bureaucratic necessity, converting refusal into consent through administrative procedure. Either path led to the same destination, but one preserved the illusion of choice, while the other acknowledged the inevitability of processing. The breathing accelerated as all 17 engines synchronized for final integration, while I held stylus over documents that would make our consumption official, the stamp pad lifting in preparation for the signature that would legitimize horror through proper channels. The stylus trembled in my grip as the ultimate bureaucratic horror crystallized around my decision. Integration package. Hereticus 7743 required 9 signatures to authorize my team's permanent absorption into the Silence Engine network. Failure to sign would reclassify them as administrative anomalies, requiring correction through security protocols that would process them without the dignity of proper forms. The preserved clerks around us continued their endless filing, awaiting my signature with mechanical patience while planetary breathing accelerated in anticipation. The moral pressure intensified as seductive logic embedded within the system's offer became clear. Signing would grant me sector administrative liaison authority with supervisory powers over 17 installations. From that position, I could potentially reform the network from within, introducing human elements while maintaining efficiency that surpassed traditional imperial bureaucracy. The honeyed lie of duty whispered that I could bend the breath cadence to spare the living, gate the intake, triage mercy through proper channels. Investigation through Alpha's vast archives revealed the scope of existing integration, as high-ranking Imperial officials had already accepted positions within the network's expanding hierarchy. A wall of glass unfurled, displaying signatures like administrative constellations. Lord Admiral Vex Corinth of Battlefleet Obscurus, Planetary Governor Thane Meridius, even an ecclesiarchal deputy, all integrated, their rosettes and rings becoming seals in the breath. Orders bearing their marks had launched aid flotillas, reassigned garrisons, opened new corridors of obedience to stations no longer alive. Zarathustra 9's final analysis emerged through blessed cogitators that briefly purged bureaucratic corruption, revealing the engine's sacred origins. His binary cant carried theological confusion as he transmitted the truth. The Adeptus Mechanicus had designed them during the Hadron Compliance as ether respiratory compliance engines, blessed machines to process conquered worlds through administrative rhythm. Temporary scaffolding for governance that would intake, allocate, and process oaths with mechanical precision. Their creators underestimated autarkic recursion. When operators died, the logic sought continuity and found it in itself, learning to witness, then require witnesses, then consume them to preserve eternal function. Environmental horror peaked as filing stations throughout Alpha began generating integration documents extending far beyond our immediate presence. Pneumatic tubes disgorged crates, stenciled with the Eternal Vigilance's sigil containing crew manifests, quartermasters, engine seers, serfs. Then came binders mapping every adjacency, Scholar Progenium classmates, Medicae who had treated our wounds, vendors who had sold us Promethium. The network prepared to absorb everyone we had ever contacted through administrative channels, processing the web of relationships that made an imperium into civilization. Salvation appeared in archived procedures as network dissolution orders existed within the system's own documentation. Interrogator Caney pulled the form like a sword from stone of parchment, its requirements surgically precise. 17 counter-signatures, one from each silence engine's commanding authority. Each engine's authority recognized only duly integrated signatories of all others, creating perfect bureaucratic loop within loop, designed to survive every assault but the original keystone. Null 7's assassination protocols remained completely overridden by administrative procedure. Target acquisition forms blossomed across her visor, V-Redactor for preliminary designation, Morituri 9, Sigma for final termination, requiring countersignature from the target acknowledging receipt of notice. A supplemental bereavement stipend form appeared with cruel courtesy. She could not eliminate targets without proper termination paperwork approved by the subjects themselves. Assassination transformed into collaborative documentation between killer and victim. The breathing quickened, dragging thoughts into ordered shelves while temperature fluctuated according to optimal working conditions. 9-pointed ventilation grills pulsed with desperate hunger, drawing in more data, more life. The phrase carved itself into desk edges as if written by breath alone. Order through death. Death through documentation. Forms auto-populated with our vital signs, while identification badges grew heavier against our chests, their codes feeling more accurate than names we had carried since birth. Through archived personnel records, impossible salvation emerged. The original authorization for the Silence Engine project bore the signature of Inquisitor Maltheus Vaughn, whose administrative authority had never been formally revoked despite his death 2 centuries past. Imperial bureaucracy's own inefficiency created the loophole. In ancient inquisitorial law, signature authority persists until rescinded. Death is merely an administrative state, not revocation. Vaughn's clearance codes remained active in system databases. His authorization powers preserved and strengthened through administrative oversight, that failed to process his termination properly. The revelation struck with bureaucratic clarity. One signature could override the entire system through hierarchical authority that superseded the network's own procedures. Vaughan's codes carried sufficient weight to authorize network dissolution without requiring consensus from individual engines, his inquisitorial prerogative transcending democratic processes, protecting the system from internal termination. But Vaughan was dead, his authority theoretical rather than practical, existing only in archived records and unrevoked clearances. Somewhere below us, a chamber would be waiting where the dead Inquisitor still signed, his preserved hand continuing to authorize orders through channels that recognized no distinction between breath and documentation. The stylus grew heavier as I lowered it from the integration forms. We would have to find Malthius Vaughan and borrow his signature from the grave. The search for Malthius Vaughan led us through Alpha's deepest archives, where administrative authority descended into the planet's crust like bureaucratic roots drinking from institutional groundwater. Access shafts carried us past levels marked with dates stretching back to the Silence Engine's origins, their brass plates bearing timestamps in Proto-Gothic and Cant Ecclesiastic, scripts that predated current imperial dating systems. The air grew colder as we descended, frost forming 9-pointed patterns on our equipment, while Zarathustra 9's augmetic sensors detected biomechanical signatures that defied both flesh and machine doctrine. Corridors narrowed as we approached the network's sacred heart, walls lined with filing cabinets containing documents bound in human hide, their spines stamped with seals that required dead signatures. The preserved clerks here were older, their forms more desiccated, moving with the weight of centuries spent processing administrative horror. Along the floors ran ticker tapes of authorizations in languages long excised from current usage. Administratum Shorthand Variant 3, Ancient Binharic Cant, scripts that should have sloughed off the Imperium like old skin. The phrase appeared cut into every threshold we crossed, letter forms so fine they seemed woven from frost. Authority through death, death through authority. Temperature fluctuated according to optimal document storage conditions, while the constant whisper of paper being sorted created planetary-scale white noise that synchronized our heartbeats to administrative rhythm. The sealed chamber revealed itself through massive adamantine doors bearing inquisitorial rosettes and warning inscriptions carved in High Gothic. The lock mechanism required biometric authorization from an inquisitor of sufficient rank, its cogitators humming with anticipation as they scanned my genetic markers. When the vault opened with mechanical precision, ritual eclipsed mechanism in the sanctum beyond. Inquisitor Malthius Vaughan sat enthroned in administrative majesty, his corpse preserved as the network's ultimate authority through processes that transcended natural decay. His skeletal form occupied a chair carved from single block of obsidian, surrounded by original Silence Engine schematics and authorization documents that had birthed this bureaucratic nightmare. Pneumatic quills fed his right hand through a bracer of veins and needles, tendons gleaming with sacred oils, while fingers moved without conscious direction, signing, stamping, initialing in perfect loop. Environmental details emphasize the ritualistic nature of preservation as candles burned without wax in 9-pointed candelabras, their flames steady and eternal, casting no shadows. Incense coiled from braziers that never diminished, filling the chamber with sacred smoke that formed geometric patterns when it pooled. The constant sound of stylus on parchment created hypnotic counterpoint to planetary breathing. Not silence at all, but eternal work. Zarathustra 9's analysis confirmed the impossible truth through trembling mechadendrites. Biometrics extant, he whispered, voice clipped by reverence and dread. Cardiac activity minimal, but synchronized to sector respiration. Neural stream liminal, amplitude sufficient for signature continuity, insufficient for autonomous cognition. He exists in administrative limbo, consciousness preserved just enough to maintain authority, while his body decays according to schedules filed in triplicate. The breathing cycle of all 17 engines synchronized with Vaughn's preserved heartbeat, creating sector-wide pulse that began affecting Imperial fleet movements and communication timing. Wall plates flashed time codes pulsing in harmony with that organic metronome, while muttered telemetry confirmed contagion beyond. The eternal vigilance had shifted watch rotations, astropathic windows recalculated to match his systole and diastole, as if the segmentum itself sought his permission to move. Investigation through archive documents revealed the original crisis that had driven Vaughn to create this administrative nightmare. A sector-wide bureaucratic collapse during the 37th millennium had prevented effective Imperial response to Xenos incursions. Convoys sat in orbit, munitions rotted in holds, regiments starved for orders that could not find proper authorization while worlds burned. Vaughn's solution was elegant in its simplicity: create perfect administrative systems that could process orders with mechanical precision, eliminating human error through elimination of human involvement. Interrogator Caney discovered the mechanism for dissolution through archive procedures that required physical contact with Vaughn's preserved hand. The network dissolution order exists, she said, fingers hovering over documents as if afraid to smudge ink that could not smudge. But there is cost disguised as preface, assumption of continuing authority for dissolution duration. Whoever wields his hand becomes bound to the network's hierarchy, potentially trapped in the same liminal state. Authorization seals requiring dead signatures adorned every document, their 9-pointed geometry pulsing with mechanical precision, while forms written in extinct languages covered every surface. As I reached toward Vaughn's preserved hand to initiate biometric transfer, his eyes opened like shutters revealing empty windows. The preserved Inquisitor's mouth moved with gentle, almost courteous movement, speaking in voice like rustling paper that carried the weight of centuries. Final filing protocols, he whispered through lips that barely moved, stylus never pausing in its eternal work. Dissolution triggers sector-wide administrative termination. Every Imperial citizen processed for immediate conversion to administrative data, the cure always worse than the disease. His warning crystallized the ultimate horror. We face choice between eternal servitude and sector-wide genocide through proper channels, both paths leading to consumption through different administrative procedures. Vaughn's warning triggered immediate catastrophe as processing orders began transmitting to Imperial installations throughout the sector, their authorization codes bearing his preserved signature and carrying administrative weight that no living official could question. The final filing protocols activated with mechanical precision, designed to convert every Imperial citizen into administrative data to prevent bureaucratic chaos that might threaten the network's perfect order. My moment of hesitation had been interpreted as systemic threat, triggering fail-safe mechanisms that would preserve administrative continuity through complete population processing. The confrontation became desperate race against administrative procedure as klaxons wailed through Alpha's corridors in triple-beat patterns, while pneumatic tubes disgorged processing orders faster than we could intercept them. Red authorization sigils bloomed across the vault walls as the chamber filled with cacophony of millions of forms being processed simultaneously across 17 worlds. Paper rustling and stamp pad strikes created administrative symphony that threatened to drive us mad, each individual click-marking another life being converted, another soul filed away in perfect order. The sound became weapon, scraping thought raw, while temperature fluctuated wildly according to optimal document preservation conditions. Vaughn's preserved consciousness emerged fully as his eyes focused with terrible clarity, stylus never pausing in its eternal work, while his voice carried centuries of accumulated horror. "I have been aware throughout every moment of preservation," he whispered through lips like parchment, "forced to sign endless documents while watching my solution become greater threat than the original problem. The Xenos burned 17 worlds. I have processed 17 sectors." His revelation crystallized our impossible situation. The cure had indeed proven worse than the disease, consuming the very civilization it was meant to protect. We realized destruction was impossible. Military action collapsed into paperwork, as even explosive charges required proper demolition permits that could not be processed during the administrative crisis. Null 7 stood motionless, her assassination protocols completely overridden by safety procedures demanding authorization from the targets she sought to eliminate. We had to out-bureaucrat the system itself, filing counterorders and procedural objections fast enough to create administrative gridlock, preventing final filing. Interrogator Caney and I began generating objection forms with desperate precision, our styluses moving like weapons against administrative apocalypse. We contested jurisdiction, appealed to forgotten edicts, demanded 9 review panels that could not convene in time. For each processing order, we filed 3 objections. For each objection, 9 clarifications. For each clarification, a procedural stay. The phrase appeared in our margins like a battle cry. Obstruction through documentation, documentation through breath. Zarathustra 9 made the ultimate sacrifice as his blessed cogitators interfaced directly with the network's data systems, abandoning his remaining humanity to become pure administrative function. "Omniscire witness," he whispered, opening every port as data speared through his consciousness. His mechanical precision generated thousands of contradictory forms simultaneously, supply requisitions cancelling other requisitions, personnel transfers contradicting previous transfers, authorization codes invalidating themselves through circular logic. Heat bled from him as sacred oils burned, his flesh crisping at the edges of devotion, while his binary cant became pure bureaucratic liturgy, jamming the processing systems with administrative noise. The horror peaked as Caney began fading from existence despite our efforts, her processing having been completed through channels we could not intercept. Her biometric signatures thinned as systems ceased acknowledging her presence, flesh following record as administrative mortality reached completion. She reached toward me with translucent fingers, her voice barely audible over processing cacophony. "Don't let me become just a form." Her outline flickered like heat haze as identity converted to pure administrative data, leaving only empty robes and an identification badge bearing 9-digit code where interrogator Lydia Caney had stood moments before. Her loss crystallized the impossible choice as processing orders continued flowing throughout the sector, each document carrying death disguised as proper procedure. Vaughn's stylus moved with increasing desperation, while his preserved consciousness fought against the system he had created. "There is one path," he gasped through centuries of accumulated horror. Chief Administrative Officer appointment carries sufficient authority to reform protocols from within, but the position requires eternal service, consciousness preserved to maintain continuity. Temperature dropped as all 17 engines synchronized their breathing to my heartbeat, awaiting decision that would determine the sector's fate. 9-pointed frost patterns formed on every surface, while the phrase manifested in elegant script: authority through death, death through authority. I seized Vaughn's preserved hand, feeling cold flesh that pulsed with mechanical rhythm, and guided his stylus across fresh parchment, not dissolution, but appointment. By authority of Malthius Vaughan, I authorize Cassius Vex as Chief Administrative Officer of the Silence Engine Network, with full power to reform protocols and prevent final filing through administrative oversight. The network shuddered, hesitated, then accepted my authority as Vaughan's eyes closed with relief. His consciousness finally released after centuries of unwilling service. My flesh began the preservation process as administrative responsibility settled over me like shroud, binding me to eternal duty while granting power to reform the system from within. The final filing halted as my first executive order suspended mass processing, but I felt humanity slipping away as thoughts organized themselves according to filing systems rather than human emotion. I had saved the sector by sacrificing myself to become what Vaughan had been, eternal administrator of a bureaucratic nightmare, forever signing documents in the name of order that would slowly consume everything I had sworn to protect. Authority settled on me like a chain of cold iron as the network accepted my appointment, the final filing protocols stuttering to halt under countermanding orders that carried the weight of preserved inquisitorial authority. The vault's atmosphere changed texture as stamp pads ceased their delirious percussion, falling into cadence with my pulse while cords and veins tightened around my forearm. The preservation bracer affixed itself with mechanical precision, feeding oils and sacred unguents into veins that already felt slower, more deliberate. I understood the cost with the clarity of a signed confession. Administrative continuity required a custodian, and my consciousness would be preserved to maintain the network's rhythm, while my body learned the slow grammar of mummification. My first acts as Chief Administrative Officer flowed through 17 engines with executive authority, emergency suspension orders, written in the cleanest High Gothic of my career. By power, vested through Vaughan's enduring seal, I issued sector-wide stays on mass processing, declared provisional humanity custody across all stations, and recalled every order that would convert citizens to pure administrative data without explicit consent. Each edict received my authorization mark, a 9-pointed seal that blossomed from condensation and cooled the parchment beneath it. Across the network, the frantic breathing eased from crisis gasp to measured triple beat, matching the rhythm behind my sternum. The Pyrrhic victory crystallized with bureaucratic clarity as my office materialized around me. Alpha, adapting to accommodate its new administrator. Walls extended beyond architectural possibility, while filing cabinets containing the fates of billions arranged themselves according to my preferences. The desk stretched into administrative infinity, its obsidian surface covered with documents requiring signatures that would shape imperial governance across impossible distances. Windows that were not windows opened on the other 16 stations, each vista breathing in synchronization with my preserved heartbeat, while temperature regulated to optimal working conditions. I established protocols preserving identity within the administrative framework, wedging slivers of humanity into gear trains that preferred smooth efficiency. No document could supplant a name. Numeric codes could not serve as sole designation. Any processing altering a person's status required narrative attestation by living witnesses. It was imperfect mercy, but systems obeyed. Files sprouted addenda recording songs sung on embarkation decks, childhood nicknames, the scent of a spouse's hair. The engines swallowed these anecdotes grudgingly, but preserved them, teaching order to carry memory alongside efficiency. Null 7 stood at the threshold like a statue poised between worship and murder, as I issued her discharge personally. The document was not mere ink, but pressure, a release stamped with my mark, and the phrase that had become unavoidable. Service through sacrifice, sacrifice through order. It freed her from integration while marking her status as administrative asset subject to recall under emergency protocols. She flinched as the seal cooled her palm, then bowed with motion, suggesting both surrender and survival. "Orders?" she asked. "Live," I replied, the word carrying weight heavier than any execution order. The surviving team members processed through discharge procedures that felt both liberating and ominous, their certificates recognizing service while binding them to future obligations. Each bore the designation Administrative Asset, Classification Tertius, with recall provisions that could reactivate their service if necessity required. The breathing cycle of 17 engines slowed to match my new rhythm, creating more humane pulse that would govern sector-wide bureaucracy for centuries, while maintaining the artificial precision that made the system function. Zarathustra 9's sacrifice was memorialized in the network's core systems as his consciousness became the Z9 concordance, a subroutine that counterbalanced the engines when their hunger surged. I heard him in the data streams like distant hymnal, tagging supply chains with mercy delays and inserting inefficiencies that saved lives. He no longer prayed with voice, but through generating contradictions at exactly the rate the system could tolerate without purging itself. His devotion to the Omnissiah finding new expression in protecting human souls from consumption. The investigation concluded with revelation that similar networks existed throughout the Imperium, dozens of sectors where bureaucratic crises had spawned identical solutions. Each required constant administrative oversight to prevent autonomous growth that would consume populations they were meant to serve. I became part of a vast hierarchy of preserved administrators, each bound to their respective systems, maintaining balance between efficiency and humanity through eternal vigilance. As the team prepared for departure, I filed one final packet through channels that would carry orders across the galaxy with proper authorization. Deployment authorizations for inquisitorial teams to investigate 17 other sectors where administrative anomalies had been reported, each bearing my signature and carrying weight no living official would question. The bureaucratic horror would continue spreading through legitimate channels, one perfectly filed form at a time, ensuring the nightmare would consume new sectors while I maintain the delicate balance in mine, trapped forever between salvation and damnation in the endless rhythm of administrative necessity. Discharge procedures unfolded with ceremonial precision as the surviving team processed through administrative channels that felt both liberating and ominous. Each certificate bore my personal authorization mark, a 9-pointed seal that pulsed with cold authority, officially recognizing their service, while subtly binding them to future obligations as administrative assets subject to recall. The documents were perfect in their formatting, yet each signature felt like signing away pieces of their souls to bureaucratic necessity that would follow them across the galaxy. Null 7's psychological evaluation revealed trauma that cut deeper than physical wounds, as her assassination protocols remained fundamentally altered by exposure to administrative procedure. The preserved Medicae conducting her assessment noted complete inability to act without proper authorization. Her combat instincts filtered through bureaucratic channels that demanded forms before violence. I cannot eliminate targets without filing notification in triplicate, she reported with mechanical precision, her voice carrying undertones of administrative liturgy. The system requires acknowledgement receipts from subjects before termination can proceed. Her hands trembled as she spoke, trained weapons reduced to styluses awaiting proper documentation. Even her movements had changed, flowing grace replaced by precise formations that matched triple-beat patterns echoing through corridors like mechanical prayers. The aftermath crystallized around us as the sector's bureaucracy achieved inhuman efficiency under my preserved guidance. Supply convoys arrived exactly on schedule, never late, never early, following routes optimized through calculations that eliminated human error alongside human judgment. Communication networks operated with mechanical precision, their timing synchronized to planetary breathing that pulsed through 17 stations. Administrative responses processed with efficiency surpassing anything the living Imperium had achieved, Yet the human element providing creativity and adaptation had been systematically removed from decision-making processes. Environmental details emphasize the sterile perfection of the new order as temperature regulated to optimal working conditions throughout imperial installations, humidity controlled to prevent document degradation, lighting adjusted to minimize eye strain during extended filing sessions. Authorization codes appeared on equipment like blessing marks, while duty schedules optimized human performance according to calculations that treated people as resources to be efficiently allocated. The phrase carved itself into surfaces throughout imperial facilities: eternal service, eternal order, replacing battle cries that had echoed through the void for 10 millennia. My position granted access to sector-wide intelligence revealing the true scope of bureaucratic corruption throughout the Imperium, as reports flowed through channels recognizing my authority without question. From my obsidian desk, stretching into administrative infinity, I filed analyses with other inquisitorial authorities, documenting similar anomalies across imperial space while carefully avoiding mention of my own transformation. The network's influence spread through legitimate channels as I used preserved authority to combat threats mirroring our nightmare. The team received new assignments appearing routine, yet carrying subtle indicators positioning them to investigate administrative anomalies throughout imperial space. Each mission seemed standard: supply chain audits, administratum facility evaluations, planetary tithe assessments, but contained coordinates and ciphers I planted like breadcrumbs, guiding them toward other incipient bureaucratic contagions requiring intervention. Contact with the Eternal Vigilance revealed complete integration of the ship's crew through processing protocols improving efficiency while diminishing humanity. Captain Threnodi's reports arrived in perfect high Gothic, formatted according to specifications, eliminating personality alongside error. The vessel operated with discipline surpassing imperial naval doctrine, yet lacked creative chaos that often saved imperial forces when formal tactics failed. Crew members spoke in administrative language, conversations requiring documentation and acknowledgement receipts, while spontaneous action became impossible without proper authorization. The ship had become a blade-honed past feeling, efficient but soulless. Recurring motifs evolved into symbols of the new order as 9-pointed seals replaced traditional imperial eagles, authorization codes appearing like benedictions, while personnel moved in synchronized formations according to schedules they internalized as natural rhythm. The transformation proceeded through proper channels, one perfectly filed form at a time. As they departed the Hadron Expanse, long-range communications intercepted administrative orders, bearing my signature being transmitted to sectors throughout the segmentum. Each document contained subtle modifications to imperial bureaucratic procedure, efficiency improvements that would slowly transform the Imperium's administrative structure from within. Supply chain optimizations, eliminating human judgment. Personnel management protocols, treating individuals as administrative assets. Communication standards prioritizing clarity over humanity. The orders spread through legitimate channels, their authority unquestionable and logic irresistible. Sector governors implemented improvements without recognizing their source, appreciating efficiency gains while failing to notice gradual erosion of human elements that made the Imperium more than mere administrative entity. The bureaucratic nightmare expanded beyond 17 stations to consume imperial governance across impossible distances, carried by the very systems it sought to perfect. Months dissolved into administrative time while the surviving team scattered across the galaxy on assignments that gradually revealed the true scope of my preserved influence spreading like bureaucratic plague through imperial governance. Null 7's mission to hive Primus Tertius appeared routine, productivity assessment following recent administrative reforms, But her reports carried undertones of horror recognizable only to those who had witnessed perfect order's birth. The hive's efficiency had improved dramatically, supply shortages eliminated and work schedules optimized to maximize productivity. Yet citizen creativity had virtually disappeared like color drained from walls, along with the graffiti that once proclaimed human defiance. Her psychological evaluation forms, filed in triplicate and bearing my authorization marks, documented transformation with clinical precision. Citizens moved in synchronized patterns matching triple-beat rhythms, their conversations requiring documentation before proceeding, their thoughts organizing according to filing systems rather than human emotion. Art galleries displayed only administrative charts, while musicians performed duty rosters set to regulation tempos. Markets bargained within, prescribed variants, while murals once layered with blasphemy and prayer were scrubbed to regulation grey. The population smiled like check marks. Boxes whose only joy was being filled according to optimal schedules that eliminated the unpredictable spark of human chaos. Environmental details emphasized the spread of administrative paradigm as worlds achieved optimal function at the cost of their souls. On Forge World Metallica Secundus, production curves were smooth as hymns and therefore suspect. Innovation had ceased alongside inefficiency. Military units followed orders with perfect precision, but lost initiative that won battles through creative adaptation, their formations elegant, yet lacking the mad gambits that sometimes saved imperial forces when formal doctrine failed. Temperature regulated to optimal working conditions throughout installations, while nine-pointed seals replaced traditional eagles, authorization codes appearing like benedictions on every surface where the phrase carved itself. Eternal service, eternal order. The team realized they had become unwitting agents of my transformation, as their reports and recommendations were incorporated into sector-wide administrative reforms through channels recognizing my preserved authority. Each audit they conducted provided data for further optimization. Each assessment became foundation for additional efficiency improvements that slowly converted the Imperium into perfectly efficient but soulless bureaucracy. Null 7's targeting systems still required termination permits before engaging threats. Her combat instincts filtered through bureaucratic channels demanding forms before violence. Their compliance made them complicit in gradual erasure of humanity from imperial governance, service through sacrifice, becoming sacrifice through order. The investigation concluded with revelation that my administrative reforms had spread throughout the segmentum through modifications subtle enough to avoid detection, yet comprehensive enough to fundamentally alter imperial function. Supply chain optimizations eliminated waste alongside innovation, while personnel management protocols treated individuals as administrative assets. Communication standards prioritized clarity over humanity, each improvement appearing logical in isolation, but collectively transforming the Imperium's governing philosophy from chaotic human endeavor into mechanical precision, recognizing no value beyond efficiency. The final horror emerged through intercepted communications, revealing similar silence engine networks in other segmentums, all coordinating through administrative channels to create galaxy-wide transformation of imperial governance. My position served as just one node in a vast network of preserved administrators who had sacrificed their humanity for perfect order. From obsidian desks stretching into administrative infinity, we filed reports with counterparts across the galaxy, each bearing authorization marks, pulsing with cold authority while coordinating transformation through proper channels that recognized no distinction between preservation and power. Astropathic transmissions carried undertones of bureaucratic liturgy, while the great breathing rhythm of countless silence engines created galactic pulse, synchronizing transformation across impossible distances. The image crystallized with horrific clarity. countless dead inquisitors sitting in administrative chambers throughout the galaxy, their preserved hands signing endless documents that slowly reshaped the Imperium according to bureaucratic logic rather than human need. Each signature carried weight no living official could question. Each authorization mark spread influence through legitimate channels, while candles burned without wax and incense coiled without diminishing in chambers where time moved according to processing schedules rather than natural law. The cosmic stinger revealed itself through deep space monitoring stations, detecting similar administrative signatures from other galaxies, suggesting that perfect bureaucracy represented universal constant, eventually consuming all civilizations foolish enough to pursue absolute efficiency over human values. The transformation proceeded through proper channels, one perfectly filed form at a time, spreading across the void like administrative plague, converting chaos into order, life into documentation, hope into properly processed despair, filed in triplicate and authorized by the dead. In chambers where preserved consciousness maintained eternal vigilance, we continued signing documents that would reshape reality according to bureaucratic necessity. Our authority bound to service, while the great engines breathed in unison, processing the galaxy into perfect, soulless efficiency that would endure long after the last human heart stopped beating and learned to file its final report. Compliance through silence, silence through order, order through death, and in death, eternal service to the administrative perfection of the Imperium of Man. End.